Greetings and welcome to this session where we are diving into topic number 7 in Module 1 of Unit 1 of the Cape Performing Arts syllabus. Of course, overall, we are looking at business for the arts, and second to that, we are looking in this module at business feasibility. So the topic is financial projections. Of course, finances, financial, referring to money. When we talk about projections, we're talking about making a forecast, looking forward into the future and trying to ascertain how much money is going to be made, how much money is going to be spent, as well as where the money is going to be spent, where it's going to be made from, right? So these are the kind of things that we're looking at. And of course, this all comes directly from the syllabus. In this session, we're going to look at how we're going to project our startup costs, operating costs, revenue projections, sources of financing, and profitability analysis. So, first and foremost, when you're starting a business, you need to look at your startup costs. Now, you will often hear people talk about capital, having to get capital, or if you don't have enough capital to start a business, you might pool together resources amongst a group of people so you have more capital, right? So, the capital is the start. We're looking at the cost that you need in the initial stages of the business to get the business off the ground. Now, an asset, of course, as we looked at in a previous topic, is anything of value that is going to help this business get up off of the ground. In the creative industry, sometimes this value might not be concrete. It might be things like intellectual property. It might be, as we spoke about in previous topics, our social capital, our creative capital, our cultural capital, or it might be specifically those concrete, tangible financial assets that have a direct and clear cut amount of money that is attached to them. And that is what we call capital, financial assets. So, cash, real estate, land, buildings, equipment, and things like that. And of course, in order to start a business, you must have some form of capital. You must have something to get up off of the ground. You must even have a little bit of ground to get it up off of, right? So, startup costs are usually separated into two different types of capital. So, these are the ways that you're going to spend the money in the very beginnings of the business. They are the fixed assets, and the money that's spent on fixed assets are called capital expenditure. Now, fixed assets are bigger purchases, larger sums of money that are spent at the beginning that are going to generate revenue or bring in income over a longer period of time. So these are not things that you're going to have to constantly be spending money on. They are those large sums of money behind things like equipment, buildings, things that you're not going to have to be constantly buying because that is used throughout the duration of the business operation. On the other hand, operating capital, as the name would suggest, are the things that you need in order to operate your business on more of a day-to-day basis. So these are going to be smaller sums of money on things like paying rent. So these are recurring expenditure, recurring sources of recurring money being spent. So spending money on things like wages, spending money on things like stock, things that deplete and have to be built back up. Even simple things like putting tea in the staff room at a business if you have a brick and mortar business. So again, of course, fixed assets or capital expenditure being those large sums of money that you need to spend at the very beginning, and then operating capital being the smaller sums of money that you need to keep your business running on a day-to-day basis. Those are more short-term expenses. So when we think about building capital, this diagram gives you a clearer idea when we're talking about fixed assets. Look at these large sums of money: buildings, equipment, furniture and fixtures, vehicles, real estate, right? And this is particularly important if you have a brick and mortar store, which refers to a business that operates out of a physical building. We know, of course, now, especially after the pandemic, we have a lot of online businesses that don't particularly operate from a physical location. Of course, something must happen in a physical location, but it's not that you can go to that location and actually buy or sell anything, right? So, these of course again are what we're talking about in terms of building capital. So you're starting a business and you want to know, how am I going to get these assets to start my business? You might invest your own funds, so this is called self financing. You might get a loan, you might win an award or a grant. There are many awards and grants specifically in the creative field. For instance, an NGO or the government or a foundation might have a particular award for a particular thing. So, for instance, if they have a grant for people who are doing community work with certain communities, or certain arts or different anything that that particular organization wants to encourage, they'll have an award or a certain sum of money that anybody who's interested in starting a business in that field then can win. You might raise funds, so crowdfunding. Think about GoFundMe or FundMe TNT and things like that. You might get investors. Depending on how long term the investment is, you might refer to them as sponsors. You might use credit. So, this is, of course, where you use money that has to be paid back with interest, right? So, you think about credit cards and loans, of course, also come under credit. You might ask your friends and family, especially when we're at this level. And of course, we're going to have to operate our own business in order to do our paper three in this syllabus. And sometimes we might have to ask the school, we might have to ask friends and family, for a little bit of a donation, so that we can get the business off the ground. Or you can use venture capital, which is something that we're going to go to into more depth in the next topic, which deals with sources of financing. So again, wrapping up on capital building, you're really just thinking about, how and where am I sourcing the things that I need to get this business from off the ground? So we've gotten the business from off the ground now, and there are some other startup costs that need to be incurred. So when we're thinking about legal fees, of course, we need to be able to safeguard ourselves and safeguard our business, safeguard our employees, safeguard our customers. And you're going to have to pay to make sure that all of the legal side of everything is covered. So you need to pay first and foremost to register your business. You need to put on a business registry with the government of, well, in this case, Trinidad and Tobago. You have to pay your lawyer. Did I spell lawyer wrong? I did. For creating contracts and agreements. So you're looking to hire staff. You need to make sure that they sign a contract that outlines the scope of duty, all of the things that you expect them to do and expect them not to do, and any terms and conditions for that employment. You can't just write a contract by yourself unless you're a legal professional. So you need to get a legal professional and pay them in order to do that. Copyright protection. So you think about things like patents. If I have invented something and I want to own the rights to that thing that I have invented, I need to pay in order to have that registered. So things like branding rights and legal rights. If my logo is a sunflower, I need to be able to register that that is mine and nobody else can use it in the way that I use it, because that is my custom designed sunflower. All of these things, again, need to be paid for. Insurance coverage, of course, is very necessary for in case of accident or in case of any time you have to make a claim for things, again, costing money. And then finally, in terms of legal fees, you're thinking about permits and licenses. So, for instance, if I have even something like a retail business, if you look at many businesses, Even stores in the malls in Trinidad and Tobago, and you look in the window of the business, you will see a cut sticker stuck up there, which means to say that they can play the radio or they can play music in that store because they have paid the license to cut, which is the corporation copyright organization of Trinidad and Tobago, right? So you need to have permits and licenses to do different things. If I have a production company and I'm putting on a play, I need to get permission from the playwright or the playwright's estate, and I have to pay a certain amount of money in order to have the rights to produce that play. Think about Netflix owning the rights to different music, to different movies, sorry. So if it reaches a point where you see that something is taken down off of Netflix, probably because their permit has expired, they only had the rights to show it for about a year or a season or however long. Lovely. So we're going on to part B now. We've just finished looking at the startup costs. Now we're looking at the operating costs. The business is running. Where does the money go when we need to run the business on a day to day basis? In some instances, you're going to see very unrelated pictures. So, for instance, my dog here, because I just couldn't find any pictures that I found were relevant to the topic. So, as we just said, operating capital or working capital refers to the expenses with the maintenance and administration of the business on a day to day basis. So things like rent, utilities, wages, stock, etc. As we said previously, this comes under revenue expenditure. In a stable economy, common expenses usually increase with an average of 3% per year. But we know our economy is not very stable and inflation is skyrocketing. So this tends to go up quite a lot quicker. So when we're looking at the difference between things like a wage and a salary is a fixed amount that is paid to an employee per pay period. So if I say you are paid $1,000 per week, however, and this is quite common in the creative industries as well. Sometimes you might have wages which are paid by the hour. So when you think about minimum wage, it is paid by the hour. So if I only work a certain amount of hours per week, I only get paid for those hours. As opposed to a salary, if I work 5 hours one week and I work 40 hours the next week, I get the same amount of money for both weeks. And then we're looking at the difference between inventory and stock. Inventory refers to all of the products made for resale. So you're thinking about raw materials and manufactured goods. And then stock is specifically the finished products that are ready to be sold. So again, we're using the example of the t-shirt company. My inventory will be things like t-shirts, it will be things like vinyl or whatever material, stencils and things that for heat transfer, anything that I need in order to make up the things that I'm going to sell. When I've printed 100 t-shirts in purple, 20 t-shirts in orange, 60 t-shirts with a particular pattern on them. I have some tank tops. I have whatever. All of these things that are already made and I have them there in stock to be sold. That is my stock. So my inventory is more on the business side of things. What do I have in order to make my products? And my stock are the things that are going to go up on my website or they're going to go on my shelves for my customers to be able to buy. These are the finished products. Moving right along into the next one, which is revenue projections. And of course, when we talk about revenue, we are talking about income. That's the money that's coming in. Revenue projections then being looking forward to know how much money am I going to make. So revenue, as I said, is the inflow. Now, this type of forecasting, you need to estimate the quantity, so the amount that you're going to make, the type of money that you're going to make, and the quality for future sales. Because even though I might make a whole lot of money in one particular season, so like carnival or hunting season or whatever the case is, we need to know, is that really quality? Is it sustainable? Is it, and as this entire module looks at, is it feasible financially for the future, or did I just have a hot moment going on there? So, yeah, of course, it is easier for an established company to predict their future sales because they have a lot of years to look back on and say, well, usually in the first quarter of the year, we make this amount of money, and we see a pattern where it increases by about 4% per year. So next year we should be able to make this amount. However, if you have a new company or a startup company, it's a lot trickier. Um, to forecast how much money you're going to make, because of course you're now getting into something, right? So this is why we do things like market research, or we use our competitors data. So we say, all right, we may not have the data, but somebody who runs a similar business to us might have the data, and we could try and gauge and look at what sorts of marketing techniques we're going to implement and how our forecast might be similar or different to theirs. Now, this is a bit of a longer topic when we are looking at sources of financing. Where are we going to get the finance for a business? These sources of financing are split into two. There is debt financing and equity financing. Debt is where money is borrowed, and if you borrow it, you must pay it back. And most times it's going to carry interest. So you think about things like taking a loan. Equity financing, on the other hand, is where you give up a percentage of ownership. So you give up a stake, or you have shares, you give out shares in your business, and it doesn't particularly have to be repaid. But whoever owns a part of your business, of course, is going to have to get something out of that business when it makes its revenue in the long term, right? So, with that in mind, looking at the sources of financing, the first one is going to be private financing. So, private in this case just means that it is non government financing. So, we're thinking about the private sector as opposed to the public sector. So, these may be businesses, foundations, societies, associations, or even individuals. And it comes in, now don't worry about this because we're going to go more in depth into these different types of financing with venture capital, angel capital, grants, and private loans. Now, of course, in private financing, you might have equity financing or you might have debt financing. So some NGOs, which stands of course for non-governmental organizations, might give you a grant, as I previously discussed. So for instance, there's the Filmmakers Corporation of Trinidad and Tobago, and they give grants to people who are local or even foreign, so particularly foreign people who want to make films about Trinidad or in Trinidad. They're going to say, okay, we will give you this amount of money towards the cost of producing your film. So that's an instance of a non governmental organization that has a grant or a fund. Or, on the other hand, private debt financing might come from something like a credit union in the form of a loan. So, if I take a loan with 3% interest, it means that I have to repay what I have borrowed plus 3% over a certain period of time until I've paid it all off, right? So some institutions also give awards in the forms of checks to individuals with innovative startup ideas. This, of course, is going to be a type of financing that you don't have to repay. So really and truly, I should say that there are more than two types of finance, because sometimes you might get money that you don't particularly have to repay, if you're very lucky to win an award or a grant or something like that. So the next source of financing we're looking at is called angel capital, which is mostly always a source of private source, sorry, from private financing. So, an angel investor is somebody who provides capital more or less from the goodness of their heart. It might be a one time investment to just help the business get off the ground, or it might be an ongoing injection of money to support and carry the company through those early stages. So, In some cases, this might be equity financing where the investor says, okay, I'm going to give you $30,000, but when you start to make money, I am going to want a certain percent of your profits. In other cases, when you meet a real angel, that's somebody who really just wants to see you be great. So you have an auntie who says, I know you're from small. I know that you're hardworking. I see what you're trying to do. Hold $10,000. Don't worry about giving me it back. Just take it as a gift from me, right? So it might be family or friends, it might be an angel group, so people who just have a lot of money that they want to do something with, or it might be crowdfunding again, so websites like GoFundMe and things like that. So for this, of course, you don't need collateral. You don't need to go and say, hey, these are the assets that I currently have. What can you give me for this? um and the people who give you angel capital, if they really care about you, they might have the business expertise and they might have the connections and the links to help you because they know what they're doing. um some disadvantages are that it's usually for relatively small investments because nobody, it's a really big risk to just give somebody a whole lot of money and expect little to nothing in return. It tends to have strings attached. You can't take well, you're really going to have to prove yourself to the person who has just generously given you this money. And of course, if it's equity financing, then your angel is going to have some level of control in running a business, because if I own, sorry, a certain amount of a business, I'm going to have some say in how it's run. So the next source of financing that we want to look at is called venture capital. So you can kind of think about venture capitalists or venture financiers as almost the exact opposite of angel financiers. So this is a type of equity financing, which means that when this money is given to you as a business, it must return back to the financier. So it's either an individual or a firm, so a group of venture capitalists. Now, why I say they are more or less opposites to angel financiers is that they tend not to give to startup businesses. They tend to want to give to established businesses because they are looking to make money on their investment and they're looking to make a lot of money as well. So they're expecting high returns on whatever they put into their business. They don't particularly care about you or seeing you be great. They want to see how, through financing you, you are going to finance them. So they're not very much about philanthropy. They want to gain on their investment. So this is why they're going to avoid early stages of businesses, because at the early stages there's a lot of uncertainty. There's very high risk because you don't know if this business is going to be as successful as somebody who's looking to make a lot of money would want it to be. As opposed to an established business, one that has been running for years, you know that with a large injection of money, they are just simply going to make more money because they have been more or less stable throughout the years. So venture capitalists try to avoid high risk, and they are just really looking for where they can make their money, make more money for them. So of course, if you're already an established business, this is great because it can help you to grow very quickly. Most times it's going to be a lot of money and you're not going to have monthly repayments. But what they're going to want, as the last sentence says, is that they're going to want shares in the company, or they're going to want a percentage of your profits. So the cons with this, of course, is that you're probably going to to give up a big stake of your business. You're probably going to have to give up more than 15% ownership, which means that the person who has given you this money is going to have more than 15% of a say in how the business is run. This could be good because they may have the levels of expertise to help your business expand, but it could be bad because giving up ownership or giving up a say in things can be, pretty dangerous. Um, if you are putting your business in other people's hands, especially if their decisions are all based on how is this going to make a lot of money. It's also quite tedious because you really are going to have to prove to these people from the beginning that you are where they want to put their money, where their mouth is. And then finally, the last source of funding that we're looking at is called a soft loan. As the name suggests, it is a loan with relaxed terms. So traditional loans will have, again, for banks and whichever lending firms, will have the benefit of bringing them in quite a lot of money. Soft loans, on the other hand, usually come from the government, and they're more like incentives for people to do things without quite just giving away money. So we say, all right, we're going to give you a loan, but you might have a really long repayment period, or you might have really low interest rates, or basically no interest rate, so that you're just going to pay back the exact amount of money that was given as opposed to paying it with interest. So this is usually given to small and medium enterprises in developing countries. As I said, it's usually government initiatives just for really getting people to be able, is that more of an incentive for people to do things. It's not about making money for the financier. And that brings us to the end of that topic. The next thing that we're going to look at is profitability analysis, but that one is going to be separated into another video because that has some maths in it. And if you know anything about me, I can't count. So we're going to look about profitability analysis in another session. But that was the long and short of our topic on financial projections. Of course, if you have any questions, feel free to comment or to contact me. Take care. Bye bye.